Welcome to Sumner School Business Immigration Basics. In this episode, we are starting a very exciting series, and it will probably be a very long series of videos on the employment-based permanent residence process. So in this first video, I'm going to give a very high-level overview of the employment-based permanent residence options that are available. In our next video, we'll be talking in more detail about the visa bulletin, the various classifications that I'm talking about, and the priority date. So if you have questions about that, stay tuned. That is coming up in our next episode. So in this episode, I want to give a super high-level overview. There are different ways that a person can obtain employment-based permanent residence. When I say permanent residence, I'm referring to a green card. Those two things are interchangeable. Permanent residence is the more legal technical term. Green card is the actual document, kind of the colloquial name for the actual document that you receive when you receive permanent residence. So there are different ways that you can go about obtaining employment-based permanent residence. Again, this is different from family-based permanent residence that we'll cover in our next series down the road on family-based options. So one of the ways that you can obtain permanent residence through employment-based options is through self-sponsoring. That means that there are options available where you yourself can sponsor yourself for permanent residence in the United States. One of those ways is the EB-1A classification, and we'll have a separate video on that in several weeks. But the EB-1A classification is for foreign nationals of extraordinary ability. Another way that you could self-sponsor for permanent residence is the National Interest Waiver petition. That falls into the EB-2 category. And again, if you're not sure what that means, stay tuned. We're going to explain all of that. Another way that you can self-sponsor potentially for permanent residence is the EB-5 category, which is an investor visa classification. When I say investor visa, I mean employment-based permanent residence. I'm not referring to the E2 investor visa, which is a temporary visa classification. We have a separate video on that earlier on in the series, if you're interested. Just as a side note, I am not going to be covering the EB-5 investor visa permanent residence classification, other than mentioning it here to let you know that it exists. Our firm does not handle that, and we refer all of those cases or inquiries out to other attorneys. So just know that that's not what we're going to be delving into in a lot of detail. So those are the options, again, for potentially self-sponsoring, meaning you could file the petition yourself if you meet the qualifications and have the green card approved without having to have an employer necessarily sponsor you. There are many other ways that you can have an employer sponsor you for permanent residence. When I say an employer, and again, we'll talk about this in more detail as we go through the series, but when I say an employer, it can be your current employer, or it can be for future employment. So if both you and the employer intend that you will work for that employer when you receive the green card, that can be a possibility. You do not have to be working for that particular employer at the moment that you apply for the green card or that you initiate the process. So employment-sponsored permanent residence options include the EB-1B, which is for outstanding researchers and professors, the EB-1C, which is for multinational executives or managers, and we'll be talking about that in more detail because it may not be exactly what you're thinking of. It includes the perm labor certification process, which can include all types of professionals, so positions that require a master's degree or higher, positions that require a bachelor's degree, positions that require at least 2 years of experience, or other positions that require less experience. And we'll be talking about all of that and the process that you have to go through to actually accomplish that. So that's a very high level overview of the kind of paths for employment-based permanent residence. Another kind of high level concept to keep in mind is the stages that you go through in the employment-based process. And again, this will be relevant in our next video when we look in detail at the visa bulletin that tells us when a green card might be available for any given category. So there are 3 major stages, potentially 2 major stages for the employment-based process, green card process. The first stage is, generally speaking, in most cases, the perm labor certification process. And we'll be talking about that in a lot of detail. If you love to geek out about the perm labor certification process, I am your lady. We are here to talk about that. There'll be a lot more videos on that. But usually it's the perm labor certification process is the first major stage in the process. If you are going through a different process, like if you're self-sponsoring or if you're going through the EB-1B or EB-1C process, or the EB-1A or NIW process, then you don't have to go through the labor cert process, yay. But so then your first stage would be the I-140 petition, which is when you submit all of the documentation. Usually it's a huge stack of documentation to show that you meet the requirements for your particular category. So just know that the first stage can be the labor certification stage, or it can be the I-140 stage. The second stage in the process, if you have the perm labor certification stage as the first stage, the second stage in the process is the I-140 petition. The I-140 petition is filed by the employer if you are going through a process that's sponsored by the employer, and we'll talk about this in greater detail down the road. But it's filed by the employer and it is filed after the labor certification is approved. Again, if you're self-sponsoring, you would file the I-140 petition with all of your other documentation to show that you meet those requirements for the petition. Finally, the third stage of the process is the I-485 application for permanent residence if you are in the United States in valid status. That process is specific to the foreign national employees or person applying for the green card. So for example, if you are an employer yourself and you're sponsoring someone for the employment-based process, you are going to be involved. The employer is going to be very much involved in the perm labor certification process and the I-140 process. The I-485, you will confirm that the position still exists at the position that you're offering the foreign national, but that's kind of it. The rest of the information would be primarily about the foreign national. So where they've lived and worked for the past 5 years or so, they have to have a medical exam, they'll have a background check done, that type of thing. It's more about the individual foreign national. So those are the three major stages. Again, the perm labor certification, if that's something that is required for your particular category, the I-140 petition, and the I-485 application for permanent residence if you are in the United States. Sometimes we have situations where our client or the foreign national in question is outside of the United States. So we have right now a number of employers who have employees working for them overseas. They are sponsoring them for the employment-based green card process. In that case, they may apply for the green card, or rather the immigrant visa at the US consulate overseas. We refer to that process as consular processing. Just know that that is an option to apply for what's called the immigrant visa at a US consulate overseas instead of filing the I-485 here in the United States. And we'll talk about those differences as well as we get into all of these details. So that's it for now. My name is Emily Sumner with Sumner Immigration Law. We practice employment-based and family-based immigration law. We're based in Richmond, Virginia, and we have clients all over the United States and all over the world. We would love to assist you with your immigration journey. If you need help, whether you are an employee, an employer, an individual, or a family, we are here to help. Send us an email at info@sumnerimmigration.com, and we would love to help you get started on the journey. In our next video, we will be talking about the exciting topic of the visa bulletin and priority dates. Until next time, I'm Emily Sumner.